Today, I'm taking you through an oil change with a full oil pan cleaning. You're going to see exactly what's hiding inside the bottom end of an engine. And trust me, it's something every car owner should know. I'll show you the state of the oil pickup tube, how it gets clogged over time, and why that can lead to serious engine trouble if left unchecked. This entire process will be demonstrated on a Toyota Sienna, so you'll get a clear step-by-step breakdown. I'll walk you through the tools I used, the parts I bought, and everything you'll need to get the job done yourself. If you want to better understand how to take care of your car, or you just enjoy working on it and want to try something new, this video is for you. Let's get started. It's freezing outside, and I'll be changing the oil using the gravity method, meaning the oil will drain out under the force of gravity. To make the draining process more efficient, the oil needs to be warmed up. For this, we start the engine and let it run until it reaches operating temperature. Before starting the job, keep in mind that the engine is warm and parts of the exhaust system may be hot. Avoid touching them to prevent burns. Now let's move on to the oil change. You'll need a container for draining the oil. I got mine at Dollarama for just $3, and it holds up to 7 liters. You'll also need a 14mm socket for the drain plug and a 10mm socket for the oil pan bolts. If the bolts are stuck, use a penetrating lubricant to loosen them. The drain plug came off easily. It wasn't even tight. The oil starts draining, and you can see how black it is. We wait until it completely drains out before moving on to removing the oil pan. I'll be using a power drill with an attachment to speed up the process. When I checked the car's oil pan, I noticed it had been removed before. You could see traces of sealant, which means they used sealant instead of the proper rubber gasket to put it back on. That's not great because some of the sealant from the inside can get into the oil pan and partially clog the oil pickup screen, which can mess with the oil flow. Once all the bolts are out, I carefully use a spatula to remove the oil pan, making sure I don't damage the pan's geometry. Here's the deal. In the engine, you've got combustion byproducts and tiny metal particles from normal wear. Over time, all of this turns into what we call sludge. This sludge builds up in the oil pan and can partially or even completely clog the oil pickup tube screen. This leads to 2 major problems. First, insufficient oil flow at high RPMs. Without enough oil, the engine experiences oil starvation, which causes increased wear on critical components. Second, increased strain on the oil pump. When the screen is clogged, the pump has to work harder to push oil through, which can eventually lead to failure. While inspecting the oil pan, we also see sludge settled at the bottom, along with pieces of sealant. I'm confident that this sealant ends up on the oil pickup tube screen, further restricting oil flow. It's worth mentioning that nearly 80% of drivers never clean their oil pan, simply because they don't realize it's something that needs to be done. I tried using a cleaner for the oil pan, but honestly, I wasn't impressed. It didn't work as well as I'd hoped. So I switched to regular gasoline instead. I grabbed a brush and spent about an hour scrubbing the oil pan to get it clean. It also took me about 30 minutes to remove the old sealant. This step is really important because I'll be using an oil pan gasket instead of sealant when reinstalling the pan. Any leftover sealant can prevent the gasket from sealing properly against the surface, which could lead to oil leaks down the road. We remove the oil pickup tube and clean it thoroughly to get rid of any buildup. After that, I use compressed air to blow through the tube and clear out any remaining debris. I also cleaned the lower part of the engine. In addition to a regular cleaner, I used a wheel cleaner, as it works great for tackling different types of grime. Before reinstalling the oil pan, it's important to test fit the sealing gasket to make sure it's the right match. Check that it fits properly and has the factory-made holes that align with the holes in the oil pan. There are many low-quality parts on the market, so don't skip this step. Now, why is it important to remove the oil pan, even if you regularly change your oil, say every 7,000 kilometers? The issue is that the drain plug isn't ideally positioned. Even if you fully drain the oil, some of it, along with dirt and deposits, will remain at the bottom of the pan. These contaminants will stay there until the pan is removed. The design of the oil pan allows sludge and deposits to settle specifically at the bottom. Take another look. I completely drained the oil, and yet look at how much residue is left in the oil pan, which would have mixed with the new oil. We've reinstalled the oil pickup tube and cleaned the lower part of the engine. Before reinstalling the oil pan, I replaced the drain plug right away. It's important to always replace the sealing washer with every oil change, but I decided to swap out the entire plug since I have no idea when it was last replaced. Plus, $4 at Lordco is a cheap fix. Now it's time to install the oil pan. First, I thread the bolts by hand to hold the pan in place. Then I use a power drill to speed up the process, but I don't tighten the bolts fully. After that, I manually tighten the bolts diagonally to ensure even pressure on the rubber gasket and a proper seal between the oil pan and the engine. It's important to feel the right amount of torque to avoid over-tightening and stripping the threads. Be careful with this. We need to remove the old oil filter. Before doing so, place a rag underneath it, as some oil may drain out when you unscrew it. I tried removing the filter by hand, but it was too tight. So I'm using a universal oil filter wrench, which I bought at Canadian Tire for $18. With this tool, the filter comes off easily. At this stage, it's important to ensure that the filter comes off with its rubber sealing gasket. Many people make the mistake of leaving the old gasket stuck to the mounting surface and installing a new filter on top of it. Before installing the new filter, lightly coat the rubber gasket with oil. This improves the seal and makes future removal easier. Since this filter is mounted horizontally, there's no need to pre-fill it with oil. It would just spill out and create a mess. Now, the new filter can be installed. Tighten it by hand without using any tools. Screw it in until it stops, then turn it an additional quarter turn to secure it properly. Since it's freezing outside, I brought the oil inside earlier and placed it near the radiator to keep it warm. Before pouring in the oil, I place a rag near the filler neck to prevent any spills from making a mess on the engine. After adding the required amount of oil, I start the engine for 15 to 20 seconds to allow the oil to distribute evenly throughout the system. Next, I check the oil level with the dipstick. It's above the minimum mark, which is normal. Then I let the engine warm up and check for any leaks around the oil pan or filter area. I make sure everything is done correctly. Bolts are tight, the oil filter is securely installed, and there are no leaks. I drain the used oil into a container, and here's what's left in the pan where we collected it. Pieces of sealant. These are bits of sealant that were in the oil. You can see the dirt and debris that remained in the pan after draining. These are contaminants that were circulating in the system. So, don't ignore proper procedures. Always try to use a rubber gasket, and if you absolutely have to use sealant, don't over-apply it. In the next video, I'll show you how to perform a partial transmission fluid change, including oil pan cleaning and filter replacement. Thanks for watching and for your support. See you in the next video.